Hello, it's in English. I'm talking whatever. You know me. I don't know. How would I know? I know nothing. Okay, now I know people, but it's crazy. It's crazy. These things that you go somewhere and you see people and they say, you're on this part of town, you're like 1 hour away from your house, you're now in this special band, Hector, and you're with these people now. I'm going, what's the name of this band? No, this is the look, everybody's got pom-pom, peep, everybody's happy here. They're celebrating the university sport band. These people here play rugby, cricket, all different sport. And over here, on this part, we're talking inside this building, right? Then over here, there's teachers, government, police, fire brigade. These people here are getting very, very drunk. These other ones are already too drunk for you, Hector. What do we do here? What do we do here? Hector, what the hell? Look, the man in front of you. Give him the ticket, please. Sorry. Here is your ticket. Now, get in there. I'm going to sit over there. Yes, you sit right there, Hector. That's where all the people that are not dancing, that are not doing anything. Look, you sit there. Look, there's free food up there. There's snacks and all that. Go get some of that. So what do I do? Hector, look, this gala party that you're on today is for the university celebrating sport. I brought you here to celebrate with them. You're lucky to come here. I said, I'll get fucked. Fuck up. Whatever, dickheads. I'm not care. Okay, don't worry. I know what to do. So I go get an alcohol and I say to the man, like this one up there. This one says margarita with tequila and vodka or something. Okay, I'll pay. They give me a big glass of it, right? And I say, how much? $10. I went, whoa, yaka, tuka. Do you think? And it goes, the other one over there is cheap and nasty. That's $6. I went, what's in it? I don't know. The man said, you have to try it out. I went, try. All right. The $6 one. Yep, I'll buy that. But it's not such a big glass. So I walk around. Look who it is. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. You people are funny, eh? You people are funny. You think, oh yeah, just go wherever. I go to nightclubs. To get to the nightclub, that really posh nightclub is 2 hours away, right? It's in Sydney, and the really posh is close to 3 hours away near the casino. I'm not going anywhere anymore. I'm not going out. I'm not doing anything. I'm sick of being red on the face all the time. Big man with a big dick. He said, suck his dick, Hector. Fuck up. I'll fucking kill you. Fucking bullshit, mate. Anyway, here's the broadcast. I don't know what it is about, but you're fucking listening to it. Oh my God. Fuck up. I love you.
Very emotional person. Greatest growth comes from your dark times. If you lean in, that is that it creates this humility and this curiosity, this openness to go, righto, nothing else is working, so maybe I'll try a different perspective. And if they respect or relate to the stories that I'm telling them, either about the athletes or about the outcomes of the athletes and teams, whether it's the Australian cricket team after Sandpaper Gate, or whether it's Richmond after 2016, or whether it's Ashbarti after a setback, they'll all look back on those moments as a blessing, because they've realised that through that adversity came the curiosity and the humility to find a different way through and a different perspective and a way to live your life that balances confidence with happiness.
As you mentioned, there were times earlier in her career where Ashbarti walked away from tennis and actually played cricket, astonishingly, for a year or so. And I think she spoke at the time about really wanting a break from that individual focus that is so inherent in tennis to the experience of a team sport. How different is it for an athlete to have the solo focus that they have in tennis than being in a team? What does it demand differently from you in working with a individual athlete versus a team?
Yeah, I guess it's a lot more lonely when you're playing in an individual sport versus a team sport where you can share and create an environment for others to be successful. And that human connection you get through team sport is quite amazing, if you like. And while you don't get that from an individual sport, the intelligent ones like Andre Agassi or Ashbarti that create a team environment behind them that enables them to move from I to we, and Ash is probably, the greatest example of someone who always talks about the we, less so the I, and that's because she's not playing for herself. She's playing for, her coach and her family and, for Australians and for Indigenous Australians and so forth. So she can develop that purpose mindset and find a why beyond just the individualism. Whereas in a team sport, by virtue of playing with others and helping others and serving others and making their day, and the great teams are the ones that create an environment for each other to be successful. And it's amazing what can be achieved when no one cares who gets the credit. Sometimes it's easier to create that environment in a team sport versus an individual sport.
You say that you started working with Ash after she'd had a setback after Wimbledon in 2018 and really reinventing her purpose and focus. And, it worked because in 2019 she won the French Open, her first Grand Slam title. Where were you watching that, Ben, that final?
I didn't go to the French. It was quite interesting. Ash said before the French Open, she goes, don't come over, Crowie, I suck on clay. So if that's her example of someone who sucks on clay, I'd like to see someone who's good on clay. So I was actually down the Great Ocean Road at our beach house at Fairhaven, and that was the most extraordinary week, probably 2 or 3 days of my life. And I was asked towards the end of 2019 what was my greatest memory of that year across all my clients, and I said it was the semi-final of the French Open. And I don't know if you remember the game that night, Sarah, but Ash is I think 5-1 up, 40-15 up. So it's effectively an unlosable set, and she got distracted. There was rain delays, a bit of momentum coming the other way, and so forth, and a range of different things. And anyway, she lost the point, lost the game, lost the next game, lost the next game, and lost the next. And she lost that unlosable set. And it got worse. She's 3-love down in the second set. And I've got imposter syndrome like you wouldn't believe. I was like, oh, my God. Supposed to be the mindset guy, Crow, you loser. And at 3-love down in the second set, Ash sits down and you can see the body language in her in this moment. It's almost like she starts laughing and she goes, yeah, well done, Ash. Clearly you're going to lose this match today after being 5-1 up in the first set. But you're letting the conditions of your environment determine your mindset. And she just kind of shakes her head, laughs, and goes, no way. She goes, I decide my mindset. I decide my attitude. I decide my self-worth. I decide. And she reclaimed the words that represent the best version of her and why she plays the game. And with that attitude change, she gets up out of her chair and she breaks the girl's serve for the first time in 9 games. She then holds her own serve for the first time in 9 games. And then she wins the next 6 games in a row. She wins the set 6-3. She wins the next set 6-2. And the next day, she wins the French Open. Right? And then 2 weeks later, she goes to Birmingham, England, I think it was. And then she becomes the #1 tennis player on the planet. And her life will never, ever, ever be the same again, right? But if you go back to that moment at 3-love down in the second set, she had a choice to make. She could let the conditions of her environment determine her mindset, or she goes, screw that. I decide my mindset. I decide my attitude. I decide my self-worth. And most of us don't realise that. We let the conditions of our environment, our version of a pandemic, kind of determine our mindset. And one of my greatest heroes is Viktor Frankl, who's arguably the world's greatest psychiatrist, who survived the Auschwitz concentration camp while his wife perished, his parents perished, his brother perished, his mates perished. He got out of there and he wrote this book called Man's Search for Meaning, and he wrote it in 7 days. And the most famous line in that book is, everything can be taken from a person except for one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And Ashbarti actually understands that principle fundamentally. Don't get me wrong, she's human, right? So she's imperfect and she'll get distracted and fall down like the rest of us will. But more importantly, when she has these crucible moments in her life, she can understand that she has the power to either accept if there's something she can't do, but if there is something she can do, to take control, but more importantly, realise it's her decisions, not the conditions, that determines that attitude.
And you sitting in your beach house go from feeling like the world's greatest imposter to the world's greatest mindset coach, I hope, Ben. I hope there was a moment of celebration for you as well.
Well, yes and no. I think I spoke to her after the game, and she's a very emotional person, Ash, which is her greatest strength, in my opinion, and it's just her passion and her love and so forth. But there was just nothing but tears after the game and all the next day. And I spoke to her coach and Nikki, her manager, and I just said, look, whatever you do, just make her laugh. I don't care if you've got to run nude through the streets of Paris, but just
what is the best way to make Ashbarti laugh, out of interest?
She has the most amazing sense of humour, wicked sense of humour, Ash does. So laughing at the incredulous nature of life or of individuals, and finding the humour through that perspective is the best way to make Ashbarti laugh by far. And
what about other interests? I mean, what about the balance in her life? How much emphasis do you give to things outside of tennis, and what do they offer someone like that?
Yeah, so I guess the three questions we work on with clients, the first one is who am I, which is it's what we call connection mindset, which is connecting with ourselves first and foremost before we connect with the outside world, and we're able to kind of embrace our weird, as we say, and celebrate our imperfections, but find that unconditional self-worth. Once you've answered that question, then you can go after the second question, which is what do I want from this crazy thing called life? And that's often where we can find happiness, especially if unlocking what we want not only unlocks a sense of purpose and meaning and contribution beyond ourselves, but it also unlocks our values and our goals and our dreams and our motivations and our needs, if you like. So for Ash, in terms of what she wants outside of tennis, so she'll set goals for herself. Absolutely, but those goals are professional goals, but they're also personal goals. So she might have extrinsic motivations, which might be to world number one or win certain Grand Slams and so forth, or reach a certain status in an external sense. But then she'll develop her intrinsic goals, which is very much around what lights her up internally, inside of herself, which might be, getting out of her comfort zone or helping others or realising her potential or finding a sense of purpose and meaning in her life.
How important are her dogs in meeting the goals rather than their expectations?
Oh my God, yes. Ash, her love of dogs, and I totally get it, right? I absolutely love dogs as well. I've had dogs all my life as well, but there's something a bit like dolphins and whales, I think. There's something spiritual about the unconditional love and loyalty and gratitude that comes from dogs. And she absolutely has that connection with dogs, and she's an ambassador for the RSPCA as well in Queensland. And yeah, just the I don't know what it is. I know she's got 5 dogs, and she also loves coffee, and so the dogs are named after Chino and Fagato and so forth. I think it's because of the unconditional love that dogs provide. But dogs have the most amazing perspective, right? If a dog loses its leg and becomes a 3-legged dog, the first thing it does after surgery and after recuperation is it gets back in the park and it starts to run around and wag its tail and it starts to adapt, right? And it just celebrates the fact that it's still living, its opportunity and so forth. And we can learn so much from dogs. Ash understands that, I guess, connection is why we're here as humans, right? We're neurobiologically hardwired for connection. Now, primarily that's humans, but it's also connection to nature and it's also connection to animals. And Ash has that absolutely love of connection to nature. She loves walking barefoot in grass. That's why she loves Wimbledon so much, in my opinion. But obviously why she loves people and people love her, but she also has that same connection with animals as well.
Podcast, broadcast.
Marks, and my family are very much in the service orientated. They're teachers and lawyers and doctors and nurses, and I think I may have wanted to be a wannabe of all of those disciplines. And I ended up doing an arts degree, and I focused on anthropology, philosophy and English. And I had no idea, and as Steve Jobs says, you can only join the dots looking back on your life, but I had no idea at the time that Anthropology was the study of humans and human behaviour. Philosophy was the study of wisdom. And English, effectively, as far as my interpretation goes, specialises in storytelling. And 30 years later, that's actually all I do with clients, is helping understand the sense of humanity and human behaviour, if you like, and focus on these principles of wisdom that, in particular the Stoics and Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius and so forth have the most amazing perspective that can teach us so much today. And storytelling, if you like, but most of my life has been spent, I guess, on external storytelling, and I guess the last 2 or 3 decades has probably been working on the internal storytelling and the stories that we tell ourselves, and realise it's not the experiences of our life that determine our life, it's the meaning we put behind those experiences, right? The narrative, the stories we tell ourselves about the experiences. 2 people can have the exact same.
Hello. I'm cutting it. I'm going to another one. I don't know. This one guy, he can tell you about his brain, that brain, every brain. I still love you. Fuck up, love you, fuck up. Anyway, the new one is like this. Look, I want to, excuse me, please. I love you too. Excuse me, please.
This film, Rain Man, I might have seen clips of it. Certainly wasn't like him.
Years, I wasn't sure. So I'd have periods where I was Ashby and then, no, I'm just normal. There's nothing wrong with me. Yeah, and it got to a point where in that cycle where I stopped denouncing it and thought, no, this is part of my identity, and that's how diagnosis kind of happened formally. It's interesting because if I had embraced it possibly 10 years earlier, I think I would have had a head start in terms of I'm someone now that is clearly very focused on a positive autistic identity. I've found my tribe, all that kind of nice identity-based stuff that a lot of autistic adults find about, coming home, finding identity. It's like if I'd had that confidence earlier, I think I probably would have been amongst a different generation of advocates who came before me. And there wasn't many. The autistic community of people my age 20 years ago was very small, whereas now it's a significant number of people. So I kind of was a bit slow on the bandwagon.
Another theme to emerge from the research was the challenges of diagnosis and the misdiagnoses that autistic people sometimes receive before learning they're autistic. That's something that Dr. Wen Lawson, one of the researchers on the project, experienced.
I was misdiagnosed at 17 with schizophrenia, which meant being in and out of mental health institutions, locked up effectively, and on lots of antipsychotic medication. And I was on that for 25 years, so that kept going for quite a while. And lots of things because people did not know, did not understand the behaviours that I was exhibiting. They didn't put that picture together then as autism. So I got my diagnosis quite late. I was 42 years old.
It was a book, Nobody Nowhere, by Australian author Donna Williams about her life as an autistic girl that made Wen think he too may be autistic.
And I gave the book to the psychiatrist and social worker that were working with me. They took, thankfully they did read it, but they took about 6 months. And then they came back and they said, we really can see a lot of likenesses. So they recommended that I go to the Monash University, where they had a centre ran by Dr. Larry Bartak in the time and his team, and they were mainly diagnosing children, but they had also been diagnosing some adults. So I went to see Laurie and the team there, spent a half day with them, and they are the folk who said back in 1993, you are autistic. It was a bit of an eye-opener. I didn't really know autism. I'd heard of the film Rain Man. I might have seen clips of it. Certainly wasn't like him. So it was a bit hard. I didn't understand what that meant, and I had to do some work. And of course, I didn't have a computer or access to things to look things up easily. So it meant going to local libraries and looking things up to find out what this meant. Autism is lifelong. You don't recover from it. You don't get over it. So initially, I was a little bit kind of concerned. I felt a bit trapped. But the more I researched and explored what autism meant, the further it took me away from mental health stuff, which was good. It still took a couple of years for the psychiatrist to release me from all my medications, antipsychotic stuff. That didn't happen for quite a while.
Difficulties in receiving a diagnosis as an adult persist today.
People come up against multiple challenges. The first step is often going to talk to your GP, but our research shows that GPs often have limited knowledge of what being autistic looks like in adulthood, particularly for women.
Professor Liz Pellicano is from Macquarie University's School of Education. Alongside Dr. Wen Lawson, she led the Hidden Histories project.
And then there's a real challenge for GPs about referral pathways. So who do they refer on to in terms of specialists? And that's because there is a real lack of specialists out there who are able to diagnose effectively in adulthood. And for those specialists that there are out there, they often have really lengthy waiting lists, so it can take years to get a diagnosis. And then finally, getting a diagnosis often costs money, and sometimes that cost is just too prohibitive for people. So there are kind of multiple problems in the pathway to diagnosis that we really need to address for people.
Liz says that many of the autistic adults interviewed for the project reported experiencing trauma, often when they were unaware they were autistic.
So one woman described how she'd been so affected by bullying and that she said she's been an absolute wreck. Others talked about self-perception around always feeling different. Other people spoke of being ashamed for who they were. One of our participants very aptly put it, "For 40 years, I felt bad and different, but not able to put that into words." Many of our participants spoke very powerfully about what they thought that they might have been able to achieve if they had had their diagnosis earlier in life. So lots of people talked about sometimes regret, sometimes, missed opportunities. So it could have made school life, work, friendships so much easier if they had had a diagnosis. They could have had access to services and supports, and they could have had potentially connected with others with shared experiences of being autistic much earlier than they have done now. And so I think it is really important to have good diagnostic services available to all who want them, at the earliest possible moment.
While trauma featured significantly in the lives of many of those interviewed, researcher Gabby Hall says their resilience also shone through.
What was really lovely in the process of interviewing these people is that I saw such resilience and strength and so many gifts and skills that it made me feel really proud to be a part of that community, and also I'm really pleased that people had continually backed themselves and lived the best life that they could for them at that time. A lot of the strengths that came out were that people are far more capable than what they've ever been given the opportunity to express. Some of the time, there were some adults who were very successful in their careers, who were very fulfilled with their relationships and who had good friendships and who enjoyed their life. But even the people who may not have been living the lives that they wanted, either financially or work-wise, or there was financial instability, there was still a phenomenal resilience and a phenomenal capacity to keep going and to be humorous and to be generous that I saw with these people. And whether that's a general trait, I'm not sure, but that's certainly what I saw with these people.
Simon Edwards has been able to pursue what he enjoys as a peer mentor for NDIS participants, working with autistic people.
It's fun, and it's something that I seem to do at the expense of other hobbies and what have you, but it's what I enjoy doing. And I guess at the end of the day, my autistic special interest is connecting with other people on the spectrum and finding out what their special interest is my special interest. So being exposed to other people's passions, what makes them tick, that's what makes me tick. It's about connecting, and this is people right across the spectrum. This is working with people that are non-verbal, ASD level 3 with an IQ of 80, who are just as much my tribe as someone who is an existential Aspie who has an IQ of 160, the nutty professor type. I don't like using stereotypes, but that is one that I think most of us can relate to, and everything in between.
Stereotypes were something most of the people I interviewed mentioned.
It's like a snowball going down a hill. Like, people often say to me, Rain Man did a lot for autism. First of all, Rain Man wasn't even autistic. Secondly, over a generation, it's like that narrative has been built up and built up and built up. And it's like, it's just one picture of 1,000 pictures. You know, you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. I've met, you know, quite a few hundred. But, you know, I could meet 10 times as many people with autism as what I've met now. And, you know, some things would be the same, but there'd be different stuff coming in all the time.
Yeah, a lot of the autism.
Hey, I'm going to the next one now. I don't know what this one is, but I'm going to the next one. I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, love you, love you, love you, love you, love you. Crazy Hector.
This is an ABC podcast.
Has also become available.
So the total amount of foreign debt that's due is, about 600 billion Australian dollars, which is still less than, what our Commonwealth government owes. But it's not the amount that it's important. It's the fact that they've got, the need to service around 15 international bonds that are outstanding at the moment. So, yeah, they have about $54 billion Australian dollars, I should use, to repay in the short term. And so, the fact that they need to repay in hard currencies is proving the challenge right now.
How big a deal is this? Because I keep reading that this is the first time that they've been in this position of defaulting since the Bolshevik Revolution of more than 100 years ago.
Yeah, you're right. Russia has actually not defaulted on any of its international bonds since 1917. They defaulted on domestic currency denominated Russian bonds in 98 when they had the Russian debt crisis, but they haven't defaulted on the international bonds for a while. So it is a big deal when governments do that, and that's why governments try their very best not to, because of the very long-term consequences. So, Richard, you know the saying that, once you're bitten, you're twice shy. Well, in the case of sovereign debt markets, once there is a pattern of default, trust quickly evaporates. So investors run away and may not return for a long time unless it's for a good deal. So that means investors are, of course, wary of these serial defaulters and will only continue to lend further down the track for a very high interest rate.
Right. So there will be consequences in all likelihood for the Russian economy from defaulting.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. And that's why they're trying very hard to slow down the process at the moment and trying not to default. So they're attempting to repay their debt in Russian rubles because that's what they've got on hand to do so.
So what do you think is going to happen with Russia? Because as I understand, we have to get through to early May before they officially default. Do you think that's what will happen?
Not necessarily, Richard. So it is possible for the sovereign bonds to be restructured. Certainly, it has happened in the past. So the Russian government could be negotiating with international creditors to, for instance, exchange their current bonds for new bonds that will be denominated in Russian rubles, for instance. So then it can continue to service that debt. So it depends what the creditors are willing to accept, right? Because they would rather be repaid some amount than an outright default and not repaid at all.
Well,
this is The Guardian.
I'm Laura Murphy-Oates, and this is The Full Story.
By cuts, particularly to those therapies. So, yeah, it can be fear and confusion and frustration, all those sorts of things.
So you mentioned people can ask for a review of these decisions. Exactly how does that work? And are these cuts being overturned at review?
Yeah, they are. So after people appeal to the NDIA, they then go to the AAT and there's a sort of mediation process. And if that doesn't work, they go to a hearing. And at the AAT, essentially you've got the government or the NDIA, which hires private legal representation, and a situation where people with disability might be represented by an advocate, usually not a solicitor, and in many cases they're not represented. And these people will essentially battle against solicitors from top law firms contracted by the government. The data does show that in a majority of cases, when a case does go to the AAT, it's changed in some way, but the process is really drawn out and takes months and in some cases years.
Right. So people end up essentially going to court or a form of a court. and are fighting against a private law firm. And as you mentioned, these cases have increased by 400% recently. I mean, what is this like for people going through this process?
People say that it can be very traumatic, and advocates also say that it can be a little bit combative, I suppose, as well.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the agency is spending more and more money on hiring external legal advice or representation. So it's about $30 million in this financial year that they've spent on those funds. In the case of one lady, one mum I spoke to, Angela, she is a single mum. Both her children have what's called spondyloocular syndrome, which sort of means they have got incredibly brittle bones, so much so that they can experience fractures, even, rolling over in bed the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
Angela's son, Toby, spent his last few months battling for some of the supports that the family felt that they needed. So that was things like registered nurse care to provide the medication, which could only be provided by a nurse or by Angela, not by disability support workers, and then other services like psychology and physiotherapy. So that was something that had, been first requested a couple of years ago, but then they found themselves at the AAT starting in October, and that was a long drawn-out process which didn't conclude because Toby died before there was any decision made on the supports that he needed. However, there is no suggestion his death was caused by the cuts or the appeal delays.
How old was Toby, sorry?
Toby was 23.
Next, the party's plans for the future of the NDIS.
G'day there, Osher Ginsberg here from Better Than Yesterday, and I am actually really thrilled to talk to you about Woolworths today. Yeah, Woolworths, the supermarket, the fresh food people. You know, the song, you just sang it in your head. Woolworths have a big campaign. It's called Growing Greener. Now, what does it look like? Well, it means that they're committed to a future that is better for all of us, to be honest. They're committed to 100% of food waste diverted from landfill by 2025. They're committed to 100% of Woolworths brand packaging to be green by 2023. And the thing I really love, they're committed to 100% of their stores powered by 100% green electricity by 2025. Now, how many Woolly stores are there in the country? When they say we're going to need this many green electrons, speeding up the transition towards renewable energy, which makes me really excited. I have those kind of conversations on my show all the time. Check out Better Than Yesterday, wherever you heard this podcast. But if you're interested in what Woolworths are doing, you can find out more, woolworths.com.au/greener.
So, Luke, there's a few big problems here, it sounds like. On the one hand, there is a claim from the government that costs are blowing out in the NDIS. And on the other hand, there are claims that people are having really important supports cut and they're having to wade through a tough review process and essentially fight the government in court to get it restored. What is the plan here from the major parties for the future of the NDIS after the election? What are they saying during the campaign trail?
It's about the early intervention work that needs to be done to help them be more able as life goes on. Now, we are fully funding the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
So the Coalition has said it's going to fully fund the NDIS and shoulder the increasing costs.
It's a difficult scheme to manage because every single person who has a disability is different. There's no cookie-cutter approach to the NDIS. You need to tailor the programs to each and every single individual. And so it is a scheme that is still building and it still has faults.
They did talk last year about a few changes that they wanted, for example, changing the legislation to more clearly determine what could be funded and what couldn't be funded. Those plans are on hold and they're not taking anything to the election on that. They also scrapped a really unpopular proposal to introduce so-called independent assessments. Now, there was a view among the disability community that those independent assessments were essentially a cost-cutting measure. And so for that reason, they were incredibly unpopular and damaged the relationship between the community and the government really significantly. So they've scrapped that, and they're not saying anything about that into the election as well.
Right, so very little changes earmarked from the coalition, and as we mentioned, they deny that they're trying to cut people's plans overall. What about Labor?
Labor says that the scheme needs to be fixed.
We do have a plan to return the National Disability Insurance Scheme back to its original objectives. And the problem is that people have been forgotten. They've been taken out of the equation. So many people have had their funding cut.
That it's a great Labor social reform which has been mishandled in some way by the government.
And we will stop the cuts, we'll stop the waste, we'll improve efficiencies.
So it's promised a review to look at some of the issues we've talked about and a crackdown on areas it believes there has been waste.
We need to put the humans back into human services.
So getting rid of the bureaucracy or adding to the bureaucracy?
No, getting it so they can talk to real people.
Right, this is under the 6-point plan that became a headline when Albanese couldn't recite all the various points in the plan. Is there anything else significant in that plan that we need to know about?
Well, the 6 points are, for Labor to have an expert review to guarantee plans won't be arbitrarily cut. They're going to lift the staffing levels at the agency, which have been subjected to a staffing cap. So it's 380 new staff and costing about $150 million over 4 years. So they're going to review the external lawyers' fees and consultancy contracts. And also, I guess, to quote Bill Shorten, who's the shadow minister in this portfolio, he says he wants to crack down on cowboys out there taking advantage of NDIS money. And when he says cowboys, he's mostly talking about NDIS providers who might be overcharging participants in the scheme. They say they're going to streamline the planning and appeals process so that the decision-making is more efficient, fair and investment-focused, and appoint a senior officer within the NDIA to boost service delivery in regional areas, which is a big problem in the scheme.
It sounds like there are new costs in Labor's plan, like the new staff, but also cuts. They want to cut down on some of the costs of the legal funding at the AET, it sounds like. Does this address the kind of question of sustainability, which the coalition has made a point of?
I don't think so. In reality, for example, the funding on lawyers is worth about $30 million this financial year so far, and the scheme's costing more than $30 billion. So that's a drop in the ocean in terms of any, cowboys out there amongst the providers, perhaps overcharging people. We don't know how much that crackdown could actually rake in, but it probably doesn't address what the government says is, the increasing cost of the NDIS overall.
And what about this idea of an alternate and expert review pathway, which Labor says will ensure that people's plans aren't cut arbitrarily or unfairly? Could that help with some of the issues that you've outlined?
It certainly could. I mean, I spoke with Bill Shorten about this. It does seem like they've identified this problem, which is basically there's an internal review where, the decision-making quality might, in some cases, still leave a little bit to be desired, and then your only option is go to the AAT, which is what we talked about, that combative process. I guess it would depend on what the review system looked like. Bill Shorten has sort of talked about having experts determine these cases in a kind of more of a mediation process rather than what the AAT can be. Should be pointed out, though, that Linda Reynolds has been incredibly critical of it. She basically says that it's an additional layer of bureaucracy which would just slow down decisions. So those are sort of the competing points.
How has Labor's plan been received by the disability advocacy community?
Quite well, I would say. The People with Disability Australia released a statement this week saying that they felt the Labor policy was a good, comprehensive plan to address some of the issues in the NDIS. Other advocacy groups have also backed it, and the Provider Peak National Disability Services, which is the peak for the NDIS providers, also says that it's a good policy.
Right, and we know the Greens have put forward quite a few policies heading into this election. Have they put forward one for the NDIS?
So their plan's called Accessible Australia. They're proposing a fully resourced NDIS and, also lifting the staff cap at the agency running the scheme and making sure that IT systems are accessible for participants. I guess it's also important to note that the Greens and Labor led the campaign to scrap the independent assessments proposal that the government put forward last year. And so I guess part of the Labor and Greens commitment at the election is that they wouldn't support something along those lines. I just think that's important to point out.
So it sounds like the future of the NDIS has become a bit of an election issue, and there's a lot of conversation about how any sort of reform can balance these ideas of sustainability of this program and the fairness of this program. How are people who rely on this every day feeling about, the possible change ahead after the election?
Well, I think people with disability are as concerned about the sustainability of the scheme as anybody else, more so, in fact, because they rely on it and they fought for it, and so they want to protect it. And that's why there's a campaign going on during the election to, quote unquote, defend the NDIS. I mentioned Peter and Ruth before, who are the elderly couple who have a son who's had his plan cut and he's in his 40s and lives in a group home. And their concern for the NDIS is what will happen if they pass away, who will advocate for their son if the scheme does change, who will be there to fight for him. And so their story is one of many where people are so desperate for the scheme to work for everybody, because without it, they're really concerned about what will happen to their children, or in the case of NDIS participants, to themselves and the supports that they need.
That was Luke Enriquez-Gomes, Guardian Australia's Social Affairs and Inequality Editor. I do recommend checking out his reporting on this issue, where he breaks down a lot of the issues that we've spoken about in this episode and the policies of the major parties, but also just speaks to a lot of people who are on the NDIS about their experience of it, including the people that were mentioned in this episode. We put a link to some of the most relevant pieces on the full story page. Regarding Toby's case, which was mentioned earlier in this episode, an NDIA spokesperson said the agency expressed its deepest condolences to Toby's family and recognises the exceptionally difficult circumstances of this case. They further say that all NDIA planning decisions are made in accordance with the NDIS Act, and the NDIA fully respects a participant's right to request a review of any decisions made. It is important to note in this case, the NDIS provided substantial funding of close to $400,000, including some home modifications to assist Toby in his home. This episode was produced by Ellen Lee Vita and Laura Briley-Newton, mixing and sound design by Joe Koning. The executive producers of Full Story are Miles Martignoni, Gabrielle Jackson, and me, Laura Murphy-Oates. Okay, catch you tomorrow.
Come and help me put the shopping away.
Me. Baka, oh, he's gone. What have I done? Wow. What's this? I have to go like this. And then like this. Okay, he's saying that. This one. And this one. Last one, and I'm doing this. What's it doing that? Why did it do that? Why did it do that? Did it just go back or something, Hector? What did it do? I don't know what it did. Anyway.
ABC News.
Jack James with the news headlines. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has held on to leadership of the Conservative Party after a confidence vote was defeated 211 votes to 148. The vote was triggered after the required 54 MPs officially called for Mr Johnson to step down from the top job following a damning report into lockdown parties held at his Downing Street residence. Senior frontbenchers and political allies had called for the party to back the Prime Minister, urging consistency and stability. Mr Johnson won't face another challenge to his leadership for at least another year. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says he's raised concerns with the Indonesian president over the Russian President Vladimir Putin's invitation to the G20 summit. Mr Albanese met with President Joko Widodo in Jakarta on Monday, confirming he'll attend the summit in Bali later this year. The two also discussed security, trade and education in the first set of bilateral talks since Mr Albanese was elected. The PM says the summit is an important opportunity for Indonesia, but doesn't think it's appropriate for the Russian president to attend. And in the United States, the leader of the extremist group the Proud Boys and 4 other members have been charged with seditious conspiracy. The charges relate to an attempted coup on January 6, 2021, when an enraged mob attempted to storm the confirmation of President Biden's election victory. The House committee investigating the attack will hold public hearings starting this Thursday. ABC News.
ABC News.
Hello, Glenn Lauder with the latest from the newsroom. Westpac has taken the lead as the first major bank to pass on the full value of the Reserve Bank's surprise rise in interest rates. Westpac customers will feel the full effect of the 0.5 percentage point increase from the 21st of June. The rate rise is the biggest hike since 2000. It takes the cash rate target to 0.85% in an attempt to curb surging inflation. Anthony Albanese says his first visit to Indonesia since becoming Prime Minister has been a great success. Mr Albanese says bilateral talks with the Indonesian President Joko Widodo covered economic investment, climate change and education. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern will become the first foreign leader to meet Mr Albanese in Australia when she travels to Sydney later this week. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's meeting with senior ministers and vowing to get on with the job after surviving a confidence vote. Mr Johnson survived the motion 211 votes to 148, enough to avoid having to resign, but it was a larger than anticipated rebellion within the Conservative Party. DFAT says it's issued nearly 400,000 passports in the first 3 months of the year, more than double the total number issued in the same period last year. It's dealing with a backlog of applications of people wanting to travel soon whose passports expired while borders were closed. And global intelligence gained from a secret app planted on the mobile phones of organised criminals has revealed the Italian mafias pulling the strings of bikie gangs responsible for recent violence in Australia. The AFP is investigating 51 Italian organised crime clans with up to 5,000 members living and working in Australia. Investigators say they're responsible for smuggling in tons of illegal drugs and laundering billions of dollars in dirty money. ABC News.
Okay, I have stopped it now. It's going 47, 33. Okay. I'm not a bad guy, all right? Everybody keeps saying, I might drink alcohol, or sometime when I drink alcohol, I smoke. No, I'm not a bad guy, because when I go somewhere like a party or a reunion, somewhere, I feel like crying, or I feel like stupid, or I do stupid. I'm stupid. Fuck up, Hector. I'm dumb or something. Anyway, there's a lot of sexy people. I see rugby union people, New Zealand rugby union, New Zealand rugby league, cricket, AFL. Okay. And you think it's funny that you walk up to a pretty lady that's dressed up with a skirt and you, nice, and you can see the titties a little bit and you go, madam, you look sexy. What you say? I said, you look sexy. Okay, you'll be dealing with this man over here who will talk to you in a second saying that I'm sexy, is it? You talk to him and he'll tell you who I am and what I am about, right? The man comes up, hey, mate, you calling my friend here sexy, do you? You think she's sexy or something? Mate, we're not going to hit you. We're not going to do anything, right? Just calm down. Don't do that. Just introduce yourself. Say who you are, what you're all about. Be nice to others, and they'll be nice back, right? And if you do want to get drunk and really badly, stand over there with Stanik, okay? He's Irish, right? And this other idiot, he's from Switzerland, right? Go there, they're drunk. Pardon? Come with me. What's your name? And I said, Hector, come here. Uranic, Irish cunt. Look after Hector. Okay. Why do I have to look after Hector for? I don't even know Hector. Just look after Hector. He's an idiot. He's walking around asking all the girls stupid things, man. Okay. All right. Hello, Hector. What are you doing? Nothing much. I'm just seeing this pretty girl. This one Latin American. Hector, stop pointing your fingers at him. Fuck up, Hector. The blokes are getting upset with you, Hector. The what you call it, the security guard or the bouncer will come and kick you out in a minute. Who you come with? With them people over there. And why aren't you with them? They said I can do whatever I want. Okay, Hector, we better go to see your friend. I'm Irish, right? We're both similar heights, Hector. Let's go see your friend. Hello. I've got Hector. He's lost. No, Hector. What do you do now? Did you spew on the floor or something? Did you kill the rabbit, did you? What the fuck's wrong with you, Hector? Fuck up, Hector. What do you want to do, dickhead? Jono, sorry. Well, stand here with us, Hector. Or you want to be with the Irish bloke, do you? Huh? What do I do? Okay, Hector, cut it out now. Cut it out. Behave. We've got a long way home. You know that. Okay, Jono. What do I do? Nothing. You don't do nothing. Just stand with us or behave. You can't just walk around and say, hey, bitch, or hey, do this, or blah, blah. Don't pump it up. Don't fucking kid it. You'll be dancing in a minute, knocked out. Okay, I must go now. Poor little boy. Oh, poor Hector. Look, the security guard is watching us. Okay, why is this posh party going on for anyway? Hector, calm down, right? Calm down, right? When the music comes on, we can go dance and then we'll see if anyone wants to dance with you, right? Oh, right. Okay, how do I do that? How do I do that? You just get on the dance floor and there will be some lady that will see you not having a partner, will ask if you can dance with someone. You do it. Yes, I'll do it, because you're going to go up to the lady and say, excuse me, madam, you look so pretty. Oh, you got nice titties. Fuck up, Hector. You're a dickhead. All right, calm down. Time to cut this shit off, all right? You're going right on the face. Fuck up, Hector. Let's go, mate. Let's go. Sporty, lordy, walori, quecho calahuelo, pala pello. All right, funky go, Medina. Don't start crying now, Hector, the poor little baby. People are taller than you, Hector. People are younger than you. People are sexier than you. So behave, malakas, marokitukakas. All right, subscribe to my channel. This is my recording. Goodbye. Adios, amigos. Thank you. I don't know. You think I'm bad? You think I'm ugly? You think I'm stupid? Whatever. Fuck it, Hector. Subscribe to my channel. Subscribe. Adios. I love you. Hello, it's in English.